what is Israel's ultimate objective? Obviously, and aside from obliterating any mention of the Palestinian people from appearing in the international lexicon ever again, the answer is that Israel seeks to become the hegemon of the Middle East, establishing itself as the sole and preeminent power sat at a crossroads of trade, energy, and vital communications infrastructure, crafted in an image of its own design. With superpower ambitions of its own, Israel is now creating a Leviathan of influence and power that it will coil around the Middle East to constrict and destroy any who stand in its way, and to supplant the US as the region's preeminent power while doing so.
What has to be done is to have alternative routes, oil pipelines going west through the Arabian Peninsula, right up to Israel, right up to our Mediterranean ports, and you've just done away with the choke points forever.
Netanyahu has made repeated references to a greater Israel, which invokes a biblical territory that extends from the Nile in Egypt to the Euphrates in parts of Turkey, Syria, and Iraq. The Nagel Committee report to the Israeli government that discussed Israel's future proactive, self-sufficient, and offensive military strategy further identified Turkey and Syria as future adversaries.
Turkey is the new Iran.
So what does this Zionist Leviathan actually look like? And will major regional powers like Turkey be able to stand against it to ensure that they and their people aren't swallowed whole? Let's dig deeper. The core of Israel's plan is to establish itself as a hub of seaborne commercial shipping, energy distribution, and communications infrastructure. The head of the Leviathan lies in the Mediterranean, while its body will pass through the Red Sea into the Gulf of Aden and ultimately the Indian Ocean. Let's start in the Mediterranean, where Israel is actively working to undermine Turkey's Mavi Vatan, or Blue Homeland, naval supremacy doctrine. This pillar of Turkish grand strategy seeks to establish Ankara's dominion across 462,000 square kilometers of maritime territory, a partial throwback to the heyday of the Ottoman Empire. Turkey seeks to secure its energy interests in drilling for natural gas and to counter perceived encirclement from other Mediterranean powers, such as Israel. But the Leviathan is already trying to poison this Turkish dream. On 29th of December 2025, Israel, Greece, and Cyprus began open discussion of a trilateral military pact that moved beyond mere drills. They established a maritime cybersecurity center of excellence in Cyprus and are moving to create a 2,500-man rapid response force.
We will advance IMEC, the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. This is an idea that has been brought forward before, but we think we have to put it into reality. It's a maritime rail pipeline, energy pipeline, and cable connectivity between Asia and Europe going through Israel, Cyprus, and Greece.
So why is Israel forging these alliances in the Mediterranean? Well, in part, it's because of Turkey's maritime border thousands of kilometers away with Libya, ratified by Turkey and the Libyan government of national accord in 2019, with further moves to recognize it made in recent years by the eastern Libyan authorities under strongman Khalifa Haftar to court Ankara's good graces. This agreement seeks to bridge the northern and southern Mediterranean coastlines with a corridor that creates an exclusive economic zone connecting the two countries. This bisection of the sea undoubtedly led to concern and consternation from other Mediterranean powers, including Greece, Cyprus, Egypt, and of course Israel. The 2019 memorandum between Ankara and Tripoli was more than just a bureaucratic filing. It started to look very much like a physical blockade of Israel's energy ambitions. By drawing a line across the Mediterranean, Turkey effectively claimed right-of-way for any pipeline or cable connecting Israel's Leviathan and Tamar gas fields to the European mainland. This is where the Great Sea Interconnector project becomes an important flashpoint in the brewing conflict in the Mediterranean. But we must be precise here. The project is not yet operational. In fact, it has become a major theater of the Cold War between Israel's Leviathan and Turkey's Blue Homeland. While the European Union has pledged hundreds of millions in funding, the physical laying of the cable has been met with the presence of Turkish warships, who frequently run interference on survey ships they deem to be a threat to Turkish interests. In turn, the EU has repeatedly condemned Turkish ambitions and has even seemingly placed them on a threat picture equal to Russia and China. Ursula von der Leyen, the head of the EU's executive branch, stated on the 21st of April, "We must succeed in completing the European continent so that it is not shaped by Russian, Turkish, or Chinese influence." While the Europeans have sought to walk back from the obvious belligerence of the tone directed toward an EU candidate state and NATO member, There is no mistaking that when it comes to Turkey, Israel's and the EU's interests appear to be converging. Ankara's stance, however, is that the Great Sea interconnector will traverse its continental shelf without its permission, violating its sovereignty. In response, Israel and EU power Greece have shifted from purely economic discussions to the language of naval escorts. As such, the Leviathan's head is currently baring its teeth in these contested waters, attempting to force a link to the European power grid that will turn Israel into the Mediterranean's primary energy dispatcher, effectively bypassing Turkish territory and snubbing Turkish claims of sovereignty. This maritime struggle was outlined as part of a multi-dimensional threat perception by the Nagel Committee, the report of which was presented to the Israeli cabinet in January 2025. This wasn't just a policy paper, it was a roadmap for securing Israel's future, and Turkey is seen as the primary roadblock. The report, led by Professor Jacob Nagel, a former Israeli national security chief and a current IDF reservist commissioned officer, explicitly moved Turkey from the category of difficult neighbor to primary strategic rival. The report also made clear that the threat posed by Turkish alleged ambitions to re-establish the Ottoman Empire, in conjunction with its deepening alliance with the new authorities in Syria, makes it a future threat far more serious than Iran had ever been. Nagel's findings suggested that with Iran's regional footprint receding, Turkey was the only power with the military depth, industrial base, and ideological conviction to challenge Israeli hegemony. This realization has sparked the frantic expansion of Israeli alliances, particularly as much of Israel's energy needs from Azerbaijan pass through Turkey. We aren't just talking about diplomatic handshakes. We're talking about Israel engaging in structural integration. There is an emerging consensus within the Israeli security establishment that now sees the Mediterranean as the opening gambit in a much larger game of encirclement of enemies and trade routes that enable massive amounts of wealth to pass through their sphere of influence. So if the Mediterranean is the head of this Leviathan, the Red Sea is undoubtedly its body. And here, the Leviathan has struck its first blow and made its intentions clear.
Mr. Prime Minister.
It's good to talk to you, and before anything else, I want you to know that I'm signing now, as we speak, Israel's official recognition of Somaliland and its right of self-determination.
On 26th of December 2025, Israel became the first UN member state to recognize the Republic of Somaliland. Alongside its close Arab ally, the UAE, Israel has long been grooming warlords in the breakaway region to foment strife and instability with Mogadishu, who just so happens to be a Turkish ally.
I think this will be a great opportunity for expanding our partnership. We intend to work together with you. I want to use this opportunity, sir, to invite you to an official visit to Israel at your convenience.
Now, to the casual observer, this might seem like a fringe move in a forgotten corner of the Horn of Africa. But in reality, it's a masterstroke of maritime positioning designed to counterbalance and eventually uproot Turkish power. By establishing formal ties with Hargeisa, Israel has secured a permanent naval and intelligence presence in the port of Berbera, which has been developed as a logistics and military facility by the Emiratis since 2017. In addition to the bases dotted around the Gulf of Aden by their Emirati ally, Israel itself will be constructing military facilities and listening posts with the express purpose of targeting Yemen's Houthis, although they will likely also target other Yemeni actors hostile to their interests. This positioning in Somaliland gives the Leviathan a dominating overwatch position on the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, the southern gate of the Red Sea linking to the Gulf of Aden. Roughly 12% of global trade passes through here, and I don't need to tell you how dangerous to the world's economy it would be if it gets shut down. Just look at the havoc caused by the closing of the Strait of Hormuz. Speaking of Hormuz, there's a very good reason why Israel is setting up shop in Somaliland, and it probably owes a great deal of thanks to the UAE, who have been the primary backers of the Somaliland cause for years. Until recently, the UAE was also heavily involved in the conflict across the water in Yemen, until their malign influence became so unbearable that the Saudis put their foot down and forced them out. By synergizing their efforts in Somaliland with Israel, the UAE has effectively helped Israel build an argument for a well-guarded energy and trade transit route. Eventually, this will allow Israel to turn world opinion towards shifting commercial shipping away from the volatile Arabian Gulf and Hormuz, which Iran can still harass, and toward a new Red Sea corridor that Israel and its allies will seek to dominate and control.
The threats we face are real. Together, we're defending not only our own nations, but vital sea lanes and critical infrastructure that the global economy depends on.
Astutely, Israel is now also using the Hormuz crisis to strengthen the argument for expanding the oil and gas infrastructure of the fossil fuel-rich Arab states and connecting them to the existing Israeli infrastructure at the Eilat-Ashkelon pipeline. This will provide a direct land route from the Gulf of Aqaba into the Mediterranean Sea, bypassing even the need for shipping to go through the 156-year-old Suez Canal running through Egypt. Tankers can simply dock on Israel's Mediterranean coast, load up with oil, and sail away without ever having to go near the rougher parts of the neighborhood. While Syria has also been lobbying for an expansion of its role as an energy hub, the tragic reality for that country is that it will require significant investment and time to set up the required infrastructure, and it currently cannot compete with Israel. Tel Aviv's message to the wealthy American and European markets is clear. If you want your goods and energy to move safely from Asia to Europe and beyond, you must go through our gates. And those gates that will link intercontinental trade and energy will feature another rising economic giant and Israeli ally, India. India is the least talked about pillar in this emerging architecture. The India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor, or the IMEC, was announced in late 2023 and revitalized in early 2026, and it's the economic justification for the Leviathan's existence. India needs a stable, Israeli-secured route to reach European markets that avoids the instability of the Iranian land bridge or the Turkish-backed Iraq-Europe development road that is projected to take shipping from the Iraqi Al Faw port on the Arabian Gulf, which will again involve, and you guessed it, transiting through Hormuz. Israel's routes will be viewed by India as being more secure and reliable, and can act as a counterbalance to China's Belt and Road Initiative that could monopolize trade routes in Beijing's favor to Delhi's detriment. In this sense, the Leviathan of Israeli influence fully encompasses India, who's keen to find alternatives to China that is close to its longtime enemy, Pakistan. But this encirclement has not gone unnoticed by the other side of the board. Ankara is fully aware of the Nagel report's implications and the connectivity siege being laid by Tel Aviv that seeks to bypass Turkish territory and interests altogether. In response, we are seeing the emergence of what is being called the Sunni Axis, even though the countries involved are multi-confessional in nature. In addition to its existing ties to gas mega producer Qatar, Turkey has spent the last year moving closer to Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. This is a pragmatic axis that seeks to emphasize the shared security and economic concerns of all involved. Saudi Arabia, while a signatory to India's IMEC, is deeply wary of an unchallenged Israeli hegemon on its doorstep that has shown a wanton disregard for Gulf security and prosperity in its reckless wars against Iran and others. Pakistan, meanwhile, is a nuclear-armed power and a long-time rival of India, providing more military mass and muscle that Turkey needs to counterbalance the Israel-India nexus. In early 2026, reports began to circulate of a trilateral strategic framework between Turkey, Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia aimed at ensuring mutual defense and working towards common interests. But it would also seem apparent that these ties are being forged in the face of Israel singling out Turkey and Pakistan in particular as problematic countries that need to be dealt with.
We need to ensure that Erdogan doesn't create a new alliance of radical Islam Sunni version, meaning an axis between himself, Julani, Qatar, and Hamas.
Ankara will be further acutely aware of Riyadh's need to export oil, which accounts for an oversized proportion of its checkbook. It will therefore need to balance Saudi Arabia's logical security concerns of an overbearing Israel with its economic priorities that could see it interface with the Eilat-Ashkelon pipeline to avoid reliance on Hormuz. However, Saudi is showing its own initiative here and is looking at putting their own spin on the Ottoman-era Hejaz railway that will connect all the way from Riyadh in central Saudi Arabia, moving through Jordan and Syria and ultimately reaching Europe via Turkey. It's also being discussed that this proposed railway could help supplement the planned Iraq-Europe development road, adding more volume and more routes for the overland plan at ensuring these powers don't place all their eggs in one basket. Now this brings us to the cyber aspect of the Israeli Leviathan, the invisible coil of data and information flows that underpins modern power and economies. While the world watches ships and pipelines, an underestimated lever of control are those that are being exerted through deep-sea fiber optic cables. The Blue Raman cable system, a project backed by Google, is now the digital spine of this growing Leviathan. The blue aspect refers to the Mediterranean Sea, while the Raman part is so named after Indian physicist C.V. Raman, and the intercontinental cable runs from France to India. Again, though, both the Indian Ocean and Mediterranean Sea cables meet in one place, Israel, and specifically Eilat, the same coastal city that may soon be a major energy transportation hub. Crucially, it once again physically bypasses Egypt's Suez, which has long been seen as a bottleneck for data. By making Israel the primary junction for data flowing between Mumbai and Paris, the Leviathan has achieved a position of data sovereignty. It can monitor, facilitate, or throttle communications that keep some of the wealthiest countries on the planet going. But returning to land, it seems apparent that the front line of the struggle will once again be in Syria. Ahmed al-Sharat's government in Damascus is no longer the pariah state of the Assad era. It is being courted by Turkey and the GCC as a vital buffer and alternative energy transportation hub once sufficient time and money have been poured into it. Ankara will continue to push for the northern corridor that would link the Arabian Gulf to Europe through Iraq, Syria, and of course Turkey, entirely bypassing Israeli-controlled waters. This will set the stage for the next phase of the conflict, a proxy war not solely of militias and revolutions, but of railways, ports, pipelines, and even server farms. Turkey is using its influence in Syria and its recent rapprochement with Saudi Arabia to ensure that the so-called Sunni shield remains a viable alternative to the Leviathan's order underpinned by the Abraham Accords. Undoubtedly, this means that there will be a prolonged Cold War between two very different visions of the region. On the one hand, we have the Israeli Leviathan, a maritime, digital, and high-tech empire that pivots its influence from ports in Ashkelon, Larnaca, and Berbera, supported by Indian capital and Mediterranean defense pacts. On the other hand, the Turkish-led Axis is a land-based, traditional military shield relying on the vast geography of the Sunni world, Arab wealth, Pakistani nuclear deterrence, and the reconstruction of Syria as a sovereign crossroads with a substantial Mediterranean coastline. Israel's strategy is one of connectivity through constriction of its enemies. It seeks to make the region's survival dependent on Israeli infrastructure. Turkey's strategy is one of strategic depth, using its size, its history, and its newfound alliances to not only prevent the Leviathan from closing its coil, but perhaps even to vanquish it. As we stand now in the spring of 2026, the question is no longer whether Israel has the ruthless ambition to rule with an iron fist. The rubble of Gaza, the Nagel report, and the recognition of Somaliland have made that abundantly clear. The question is instead whether the Turkish-led Axis has the internal cohesion to withstand the constriction and be able to ultimately outmaneuver its wily foe to ensure a regional order where people's lives are not seen as mere inconveniences to the Leviathan's ambitions. While Iran isn't yet out of the equation, the Levant, still suffering from the ravages of war, is now emerging as a laboratory for a new kind of hegemony. One where the winner doesn't just occupy the land, but owns the very air, water, natural resources, and even data streams that connect us all.